Live, local, now. This is WIS News 10.
Right now at 5, tragedy in Florence County.
This is the most tragic event in the 35 years that I've been with Florence Police Department.
A community mourning the death of an officer after he and 6 others were attacked.
A 74-year-old man is the suspect.
That has a high-powered rifle and is firing at officers as we speak.
Now we are working to learn more about the shooter and the person officials originally wanted when all of this unfolded, as so many deal with an unspeakable loss.
The Florence deadly shooting. This all started to unfold about 24 hours ago now. Since then, there have been numerous developments.
Here's what we know so far. The suspect, 74-year-old Fred Hopkins, is a military veteran turned disbarred lawyer who often spoke on social media about a love for shooting. According to the Florence police chief, the officers who were shot were unable to be rescued until about 30 minutes after the shooting began. A vigil at First Baptist Church on South Irby Street in Florence will begin at 7.
We have 2 crews in Florence County tonight working to learn more about the shooter and, of course, about those officers who were injured and what led officials to the home in the first place. Our live team coverage on WIS starts with our Caroline Hecker, who heard from officials today and learned more details about that terrible shooting. Caroline?
Like you mentioned, Judy, it's been just about 24 hours since that active shooter situation unfolded at a home here on Ashton Street behind me. 7 total law enforcement officers shot during that encounter. The suspect, as you mentioned, 74-year-old Fred Hopkins, lived inside that home where 3 deputies had initially gone to execute a warrant on an unnamed person inside that home that lived there with Hopkins. That warrant for sexual assault of a child that we're told that child said to also be living in that home. But DSS confirming to WIS today that despite other multiple media reports, the children that lived inside the Hopkins home were not foster children. They were not in the foster care system, according to DSS. Now, one officer, like we've talked about, Officer Terrence Caraway, died last night as a result of his injuries. And earlier today, Sheriff Leon Lott with the Richland County Sheriff's Department, who is heading up this investigation, addressed that point exactly, why SLED, who would normally be in charge of an officer-involved shooting investigation, is not at the helm of this particular one.
This is being treated as a homicide investigation. And our officers have that experience to be able to do something like that. Sadly, we've investigated quite a few. We have some very experienced officers who are trained in that, and our forensic people are great too. So we were asked to come in and do it by the sheriff.
The Florence police chief says 2 of his officers have been treated and released from the hospital. The third in serious but stable condition, he says. He says he knew Officer Caraway for 30 years and described him as a heroic, gentle giant. We have not received word yet on the 3 deputies who initially went to the door to issue that warrant, but we do know that the 4 city police officers responded as part of a mutual aid agreement. They came to the aid of those deputies when they heard that they were being fired upon, Judy.
Caroline, I know that the Richland County Sheriff's Department is there working this investigation. Do we have any indication yet about why Richland County is taking the lead versus, for instance, the State Law Enforcement Division?
Well, Sheriff Leon Lott addressed that briefly today in his press conference. We didn't learn a whole lot of new information in that conference. He expects a lot of that to come out tomorrow. But when he was asked that question, he said that his investigators with the department in Richland County are trained in these homicide investigations, and that is what they're calling this. And that is why Sheriff Boone here in Florence County specifically asked Sheriff Leon Lott to bring his people from the Richland County Sheriff's Department to investigate this rather than SLED.
All right, our Caroline Hecker reporting live from Florence County tonight. Caroline, thank you.
And people in the Florence County neighborhood where this happened are understandably shocked and heartbroken over it. Emily Scarlett has spent time there today with what people are saying around town. Emily?
Well, Dondi, I spoke with several neighbors living in that surrounding area of the home in question, but none of them willing to go on camera. They say out of fear for the suspect, Frederick Hopkins, and his family, that they might retaliate against them. Many of the neighbors saying that that house was known as the crazy house in the neighborhood, also saying that they didn't feel the family belonged, that they caused a nuisance in many ways. So really everyone that I spoke to in the neighborhood only had negative things to say about the family, although they did say they would be friendly enough, but really kept to themselves. They also mentioned the children living in the home would often run around the neighborhood unsupervised. So those were some of the complaints that I heard from neighbors. Again, not willing to speak on camera. They say out of fear of retaliation from the family.
Emily, tell us about the vigil tonight. I know there's one in about 2 hours at First Baptist Church, right?
Dondi, that's right. That will be here at the First Baptist Church on South Irby Street here in Florence. I was just told that the vigil will be held inside the sanctuary. That starts at 7 o'clock tonight. Also here at the church, you'll notice the police vehicle sitting there is actually in memory of Officer Terrence Caraway. His picture is sitting in front of it. I've also seen people bring flowers along to add to that memorial.
All right, 30 years with that department. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. We'll talk to you again soon.
Well, tonight we are also hearing some of the radio traffic during the shooting. This first clip was probably the moments when officials knew that situation was getting bad.
All units, they announced there's a second officer's been hit out there.
Now, at other moments, you can hear when officers really started to try and clear that neighborhood.
All right, so you want to shut down the entire neighborhood? Affirmative. At this point, they don't want anybody coming in or out.
Obviously trying to put that area on lockdown and get that situation under control. At this hour, we can tell you the scene is very active due to that investigation. A lot of officers still on scene, collecting evidence, talking to witnesses, working this case.
All right, now flags on our state buildings in South Carolina have been ordered to fly at half staff out of respect for the violence against the law enforcement. Governor Henry McMaster made that order today. He also was in Florence County earlier. We spoke to him about this tragedy.
The people who've been hurt, those who were protecting others, know that everyone in South Carolina is proud of them, pulling for them, praying for them. And we're going to do everything we can to see that our people stay safe and strong.
Democratic candidate for governor, Representative James Smith, spoke about the courageous work of Sergeant Terrence Caraway and the others involved in this shooting. He said, today, South Carolina mourns the loss of a man who dedicated his life to the service of his neighbors. Terrence Caraway, a 30-year veteran of the Florence Police Department, a man his chief called the bravest officer I have ever known. And he went on to say, we praise and stand in awe of their courage as well, and that of the unwounded officers who were with them.
Well, take a look at this fallen officer. Sergeant Terrence Caraway's body was escorted today from MUSC in Charleston. That's where the autopsy was conducted. When they left MUSC, law enforcement had a procession. It filled the streets and highways as his body was escorted back to Florence County. I-26 westbound, in fact, closed for that procession just after noon today. Hundreds of law enforcement officers were on hand to pay their respects to that 30-year veteran of the Florence Police Department. The police chief had nothing but great things to say about him today.
He was the epitome of a community police officer. He loved this community. He gave it his all. With more than 30 years, he didn't have to do this job. But this was his life, and this is what he wanted to do. And serving Florence was his passion.
A public viewing for Sergeant Caraway will be held Monday from 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. at the Florence Center. That address is 3300 West Radio Drive. A memorial service will follow at noon.
A GoFundMe account has been set up to provide support to the officers involved and their families. Serve and Connect has launched 2 GoFundMe accounts. Go to WISTV.com for a link to both of these. WIS will have continuous coverage of this story throughout the next hour, and any new information we receive, we will be sure to update you throughout this newscast. For now, let's get a check on what's going to just continue to be a warm forecast.
It is indeed. Chief Meteorologist Menace Brown in our First Alert Weather Center to tell us more about the temperatures to expect heading into the weekend. Chief?
Hey ladies, let's talk about what we're seeing right outside now. We're seeing some sunshine and a few clouds out there, not just one, a few clouds. Temperatures around 92 degrees. Feels a lot hotter because of the humidity. About 95 with the feels like temperature, and it will continue rolling even as we go through tomorrow with the feels like temperatures going up. Current temperature for the capital city at 90. We're at 88 though in Winsboro and Newberry, 89 degrees in Sumter, 88 degrees in Orangeburg. And as we go through the night, we'll likely see these temperatures under mostly clear skies, falling into the upper 60s and lower 70s out the door in the morning. If you have that drive later on this evening, how about this? It's going to be mainly in the green. We have mostly sunny skies, temperatures around 89 degrees by 6. And then you'll notice no rain out there. Temperatures by 8 o'clock tonight around 81 degrees. No rainfall to talk about, at least for right now, but we do have a few showers in your extended forecast. Your First Alert 7-day forecast coming up.
Well, another big developing story today. The FBI investigation into Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh is complete, and the first voting is expected tomorrow. That is the word tonight from top Republicans. We have a live look for you on Capitol Hill, where Democrats and protesters have not given up their fight. We get the very latest now from NBC's Blaine Alexander from Washington.
On Capitol Hill, high drama. Senators flocking to view the confidential FBI report on Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh ahead of a crucial vote tomorrow.
You are too committed to getting an abuser on the Supreme Court?
Protesters inside and outside the Capitol turning up the heat. The vote expected to come down to 3 undecided Republicans, Jeff Flake, Susan Collins, and Lisa Murkowski. The report itself, behind these doors, one printed copy for senators and a handful of staff.
Enough already. Let's vote.
Republicans insisting the investigation was thorough and shows nothing new.
For goodness sake, this is the United States of America. Nobody is supposed to be guilty until proven innocent.
But Democrats blasting the report as superficial.
They didn't interview all the corroborating witnesses. I'm actually shocked. I'm actually shocked.
10 people contacted, 9 interviewed. Not among them Judge Kavanaugh or his accuser, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. But the White House says Ford told her side under oath last week.
She sat before for hours to the very individuals that have to make that decision and answered every question that was put in front of her.
Now the question for the Senate, whether Brett Kavanaugh will join the nation's highest court. Blaine Alexander, NBC News, Washington.
Well, we will get our first idea of Judge Kavanaugh's chances in a procedural vote that's planned for tomorrow. He could then be confirmed to the Supreme Court as early as Saturday.
All new at 5, as the busy holiday season approaches, the Transportation Security Agency wants to remind flyers about things you cannot take through security checkpoints. TSA was at Columbia Metropolitan Airport today. Some of the items they showed include pocket knives, power tools, lighters, and a bowling pin. They say these types of items can fly in a checked bag, but cannot go through in a carry-on bag.
But we want everybody to know that if you bring that to the checkpoint, you're going to face not only a local arrest or citation, but also a civil penalty from TSA. And that civil penalty can go up to $13,000. So it'd be a very costly mistake for forgetting that you've got that gun in your bag.
TSA officials did say guns can fly in a checked bag if they are locked in a protected case and are unloaded. It is also important to know laws in the states where you're traveling to and from. Well, 2 important recalls to tell you about tonight that could lead to deadly consequences.
Why you are being warned to get rid of several pounds of ground beef and ham.